it's almost like an unrealistic training scenario that you would never walk into a store and see that, but these officers absolutely did see that.
Well, 2 Buffalo police officers are on administrative leave after walking up on an armed robbery and shooting the suspect.
Yeah, this acting police commissioner you just heard there says that officers opened fire after the suspect pointed their gun at them. We get more now from 2 On Your Side's Dave McKinley. David?
Scott, because the suspect was wounded but not killed, the state attorney general's office will not be looking into this. The investigation will be handled by Buffalo Police Internal Affairs and the Erie County District Attorney's Office. A large vehicle spring resting quietly today against a scarred tree belies the chaotic scene which concluded here last night on Prospect Avenue near Massachusetts and began about 3 blocks away at this 7-Eleven on Prospect and Connecticut. It's where 2 on-duty Buffalo police officers had come to purchase beverages and came upon a robbery in progress. The police only released this still photo of a man holding a gun aimed at a store clerk who they say was also shot by the suspect. It was taken from the body cam of one of the officers who took a defensive position outside the store, but then opened fire after the suspect ran out of the store and aimed a handgun at them in what appears to be a justified shooting, according to Buffalo's acting police commissioner.
When there is a firearm involved and there is a victim of gun violence that happens in close proximity to the police officers, and then that suspect points that firearm, so we know it's an operable firearm, right? And it's not even a question for that. Points the firearm at the officers while fleeing. Yeah, I believe so.
Despite being shot in the arm, police say the suspect was able to steal a car on Prospect Avenue and lead them on a brief chase, which ended when he crashed into several parked cars and where he was apprehended. Still unclear whether the store clerk was shot before police arrived or while they remained outside the store. The store clerk, we're told, was treated and released for their gunshot wound. The suspect is at ECMC, where he underwent surgery for non-life-threatening injuries. On your side in the newsroom, Dave McKinley, Channel 2 News.
But first, if I could talk about me for a second. Here I am at City Hall Tuesday afternoon where...
I'm stuck. I'm stuck between, I think, the 7th floor. I was trying to go to the council meeting before a press conference, and the elevator stopped working. It's a little hot. I have not established a P corner yet, but it's on the table.
Now, I don't know if this is a metaphor for city government or cosmic punishment for wearing a warm vest indoors, but I digress. Mayor Ryan's pick for the next Buffalo Police Commissioner met with the media on Tuesday to outline her vision for the Buffalo Police Department under her leadership. As for the return of the foot patrol that community advocates have been asking for.
So I want to absolutely sit down with the union and talk through with them what we need to do to have foot patrol and bike patrol. I'm a huge believer in it, and I think the key is finding officers who want to do it. But it's the way that you really get to know who lives and works in a community.
But the foot patrol led to a lot of overtime within the department, and overtime has been a major concern for the Common Council.
Is that indicative of just an understaffed police department, or rank and file maybe just taking advantage of an opportunity?
I think you've hit on the conflicting narratives. I've had in one ear folks saying we're understaffed. I've had on the other ear saying we're bound by contract and we're having to pay for things we shouldn't have to pay for. The reality of it is, I don't know at this point. I'm sure the truth is somewhere in the middle, and my goal is to identify those areas where we can rein in spending.
Shields also talked about negotiating with the union and building community trust, which I'll highlight this week on the agenda Friday night at 9 p.m. on WGRZ+. But Shields does not have unanimous support in the Common Council, at least right now.
I let them know that I was going to be a no vote for the simple fact that I cannot support the salary going from $175,000 to $250,000.
North District Council member Joseph Golombek says he simply can't stand by and approve a salary increase that is so much higher than the median income of his constituents.
The median income is about $35,000, and I think that it is egregious to take the salary of the commissioner and go from 170 to 250. That's a salary increase, a raise of almost double the median income of my neighborhood, my Black Rock Riverside neighborhood.
You said you beat her ass until she was dead and that you choked her. You felt no particular urgency to call for help. No remorse, no horror at what you had done.
Those words from the judge minutes before Fox's sentencing in the murder of Kurthoys. Fox sitting in court, straight-faced, dressed in green, his wrists and ankles in handcuffs. He pleaded guilty in January to second-degree murder in connection to her death.
He has not wished to fight or drag this process out.
Fox admitted he killed Kurthoys in Niagara Falls in 2023. Her remains were found last year inside a home on Orleans Avenue in the city, hidden under basement stairs. Fox once lived here.
You drywalled over the opening. You entombed her as though she were not a person, as though she were not someone's daughter, someone's friend. You sealed her away and you went home.
Niagara County's first assistant district attorney speaking on behalf of the family, who wasn't in court today, saying they didn't want their last memories of her to be connected to Fox.
Crystal was missing for 2 years, where this family was wondering where she was, wondering if she was okay.
Prosecutors say during an interview with investigators, Fox showed no remorse.
He lacked any show of emotion. He spoke of it like you or I would speak of having lunch.
Fox is already serving 2 sentences of 20 years to life after admitting he killed 2 other women, Cassandra Watson sometime between 2003 and 2004, and Marquita Mole in 2021.
You have had more chances than most men receive in a lifetime. Each time the system extended to you an opportunity that you chose to squander, that you chose to repay with more violence, more victims, more destruction. That cycle has finally ended.
On your side in Lockport, Courtney Courtwright, Channel 2 News.
Starting Saturday, it will no longer be legal for employers in New York State to use your credit history, meaning things like your credit score and details about late payments, to make decisions about your employment. Everything from hiring to promotions to salaries is included. It's all aimed at making hiring and employment practices more equitable.
New York City passed a law that made this illegal about 10 years ago. So that's already the case down there. But in the rest of the state, this was a perfectly legal practice.
Jared Cook is an employment attorney in the Rochester area.
It does have a negative impact on folks who have had bad financial luck and, don't have good credit history.
Cook says the idea is to get rid of barriers to employment.
And, it's no secret that the economy has not been great for many people over the past several years. So, it potentially affects a larger number of people now than it did maybe even, 10 or so years ago.
There are also issues that could come up with mistakes on credit reports that have prevented people from getting jobs in the past. And there are exceptions to this new law. Police officers and jobs requiring national security clearances are examples of exceptions.
I guess I'd say if you are an employee or somebody that's applying for a job and you're asked to provide this information or to consent to it, then you should be aware that that's not legal, that you have the right to say no. If you're an employer, you should make sure, review your hiring policies, make sure you're not doing this. If you are an employer that may not be aware of whether you're doing this, it's something you should look at.
I want to see anybody that's in this suite on a list that's publicly made available so that we can really see that this is being used properly.
Erie County legislator Lindsay Lorigo is voicing her concerns after the Erie County executive sent a message to legislators asking for approval for a new policy, which would give the county 16 tickets and 4 parking passes at the new Bills Stadium. This policy would also create a lottery process for charities that want to use the suite for free. The county executive says 3 home games will be reserved for economic development. He says this does not mean elected officials will be able to use these tickets.
If they were to receive a ticket, they have to pay the face value. So if the ticket value, and it's probably going to be $1,000 or more because it's a suite seat, they'd have to pay that. Otherwise, they don't get it. If they buy a ticket to go to the football game and they walk into the suite, they can do that, but they have to buy their own ticket. So no elected official will get a free ticket. No official of the county will get a free ticket.
Erie County legislator Taisha St. Jean Tard says Las Vegas uses a similar policy for their football stadium.
They used some of the games for economic development for their area. So I know that's something the county executive was trying to mirror in the policy. But when you look at the whole scope of this sweep policy, it really does put nonprofits at the forefront. Using people, having them, most of the games, you're going to have 2 nonprofits at a time in the suite during our home games, which is huge.
This could go into effect as quickly as this football season, so I think we do need to move on it quickly. It's going to be here before you know it. And if we are going to have an application process, I think we need to give organizations time to apply properly. But like I said, I think this is a really rough draft. I'd like to see one that has a lot more transparency and a lot more accountability.
Fire professionals across New York say the incentives for volunteer service haven't kept up with modern day, and there's a new push to change that. A 20-year-old $200 state income tax credit has advocates looking for closer to $800.
Easing the burdens, offering reasonable incentives, or updating policies that haven't kept up with today's reality. This is about making sure that when somebody calls 911, there's a trained, capable response on the way.
Recruitment campaigns year after year have produced limited results, and while some departments like Bergholz and Frontier are seeing some positive signs, adding 8 new and several junior members, retaining them continues to be tough.
After 18, what happens? You graduate from high school, you go away to college, you find your sweetheart, you get married, you have kids, which is the normal progression, right? And that's where we start losing them.
I think our youngest was 16 that came in, and our oldest was somewhere in the maybe mid-60s range.
With so few volunteers, departments often end up feeding off themselves. And many volunteer firefighters go professional and in some cases are preventing from continuing that service. Officials say there is no one-size-fits-all solution.
Call volumes are ever increasing, training requirements are cumbersome and continue to evolve. The demands on personal time for our members has never been greater. And yet, despite all that, our volunteers continue to answer the call day in and day out.
A proposed piece of state legislation would offer nominal compensation to volunteers, roughly 20% of what paid firefighters earn in the same area. Supporters say it's a last-ditch effort to stabilize the system.
Despite their efforts to get that tax increase in the state budget, it is not included in this year's, but they will continue to advocate for it as they have for the past decade. On your side in Wheatfield, Rob Hackford, Channel 2 News.
The dream of Genesee County economic development officials to turn 1,200 acres of farmland and woods into a massive industrial park has been slow to materialize over the last decade and a half. Their first tenant, Plug Power, went belly up on its hydrogen plant before it was completed. Edwards Vacuum was next, but nearly a year after it was scheduled to be open, its facility has yet to become operational. Enter Stream USA, which seeks to build a data center complex nearly the size of 40 football fields. The $20 billion project, which would get $1.5 billion in taxpayer subsidies, promises to create 1,200 construction jobs, but just 125 permanent jobs when completed. The plan is getting pushback.
So we do believe that Stamp is absolutely an inappropriate location for a mega industrial site, also for a data center.
Those opposed commissioned a study by the Applied Economics Center, which claims to show Stream Data failed to provide any supporting materials for its cost-benefit analysis. But already Genesee County development officials have issued statements branding that study as flawed and intentionally skewed.
All they have to say is don't listen to the hype. That leads me to distrust these people even further.
Some feel there are numerous brownfields which already exist in western New York, which would be better places to build something like this.
They could easily put it in like Lackawanna or wherever the Buffalo steel mills were. You've got destroyed land there already, so why not just use that?
Others worry about potential noise and light pollution and the possible impact on animals at 2 nearby wildlife refuges. The next chapter in the story of this controversial project will play out Thursday during a public hearing scheduled to start at 4 p.m. here at the Alabama Fire Hall. On your side in Genesee County, Dave McKinley, Channel 2 News.
There are a large amount of road projects that are on the docket for this year, including right here on Linwood Ave. There's also Lower Terrace and plenty of other smaller streets throughout the city of Buffalo. Now, with this announcement, the city has also announced a new partnership that'll help when creating their plan for 2027. Working with a company called Civil, which uses LiDAR technology to track and map the condition of pavement to give the city a better idea of projects that are needed. The partnership will cost about $400,000 and is mostly covered by a grant that the city received as part of the Safe Streets program, which focuses on making sidewalks ADA accessible. Yesterday, Civil explained how their technology works.
Use LiDAR technology, which is 3D laser scanning. It's the hockey puck looking thing you see on the sensor. What that is doing is creating a full 3D representation of the roadways down to the half centimeter. And then we use that classic Google Street View imagery, a 360 camera as well, to understand where all the cracks are. Then as the cars are driving around, we're able to use AI, computer vision, to automatically detect the roadways, the types of cracks, the length of the crack, and everything else you can see.
The city has also made an interactive map where you can check on the status of any road work. So if there's road work happening on your street, you can find it there as well and see when it's completed as well. We have a link for that on our website, WGRZ.com. On your side in Buffalo, Natalie Foss, Channel 2 News.
As many as 6,000 vacant or city-owned properties could soon be put up for sale, but a concern raised by at least one council member today is the question of, like you said, who gets to buy that, and then without the proper safeguards, that might be a remaining question. Councilman Wyatt introduced a resolution during today's council meeting as the city prepares for that possible sale of those vacant and city-held properties, and he says that the measures to ensure local residents have a fair chance to buy in, including possible limits or other rules to prevent outside investors from buying up large portions of these properties. Wyatt says without those clear safeguards, outside investors, they could end up taking up a portion of houses in his district and others. So now he's pushing for greater protection and more transparency as this process moves forward.
I would like to see if there's a cap that we can put on it so that there are people who have means or have a number of dollars that they could put forth to purchase. But if we don't do anything, the door is open, and I know the city is cash strapped, but we certainly don't want those who have been struggling all these years to miss out on an opportunity that is probably once in a lifetime.
Wyatt says with up to 6,000 properties expected to enter the process next year, there's still time for lawmakers to consider new rules before any of these sales begin. And again, he's pushing for those safeguards ahead of those sales. We also have reached out to the Ryan administration for comment on this resolution, and we're waiting to hear back.
Here in Erie County Court today, we learned that the scale and scope of this Ponzi scheme case has grown substantially. More than 60 victims have come forward alleging they were defrauded more than $40 million.
Friday morning in Judge Koliakovo's courtroom, we learned that the scale of this alleged Ponzi scheme is much bigger than originally thought.
We believe there were at least 65 to 70 additional victims.
And that
it appears at this time that there's at least $40 million of investor funds that went to Woodhill that are unaccounted for and remain outstanding.
Is anyone disputing a Ponzi scheme occurred?
At this point, nobody's disputed that Woodhill operated a Ponzi scheme in soliciting these investments.
Lawyers for defendant David Shoemaker and the estate of Charles Mangione contend that they had no knowledge of this scheme despite working at Woodhill Capital for years and years.
Mr. Toplitsky and Mr. Shoemaker had separate offices. Mr. Toplitsky was in charge of the investor side of the business, which is where this problem exists. And Mr. Shoemaker had a wholly separate operation that involved bank financing rather than investor financing.
The alleged principal architect of the scheme, Richard Toplitsky, was not in court Friday morning and did not have legal representation there. It was alluded in court that Toplitsky was dealing with a medical issue. But attorney Charles Ritter for the plaintiffs confirmed what sources indicated to Two on Your Side last week. A federal criminal investigation is underway with Toplitsky as the main focus.
There is a criminal investigation ongoing, is my understanding, with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI. They have to go through their process, which can take some time.
Has your client been contacted by the FBI?
Well, we've reached out. I know the prosecutor well, and we've reached out to him and indicated that just as with the civil side, we're prepared to cooperate with the criminal investigation as well.
To your knowledge, right now, your client is not a target of that investigation?
That's correct.
Charles Mangione died in December 2023. His estate argues that there is no record that he was involved in the alleged scheme. Before granting a preliminary injunction that froze the Woodhill Capital bank accounts and prevented records from being altered, Judge Emilio Koliakovo had this to say.
But somebody knew something about this, and they need to account for that. It may not be all of the defendants, it may be one of the defendants, but as I indicated, something happened here, and those parties need to account for that.
As of Friday's hearing, the attorney for the plaintiffs said that only $100,000 remained in Woodhill Capital bank accounts.
As for what happens next in the civil case, there is another hearing set for July. As for that federal investigation, no charges have been filed just yet. On your side in Erie County, Nate Benson, Channel 2 News.
This is unacceptable.
Kenny Gold, the regional vice president for the Corrections Officers Union, says the 34-year-old inmate was transferred to Attica after that incident at Lakeview less than 2 months ago. Because of that incident and others, he was under an order to wear restraints when moving about the prison. But under the HALT Act, the prison reforms enacted by the state 5 years ago, those restraints must come off when an inmate is attending classes or programs. And in both cases, according to Gold, that's when the inmate lashed out against staff.
Changes need to be made, and nobody's listening to the changes that can actually effectuate some real safer prisons and better environments for everybody working and living there.
Being allowed to restrain inmates prone to violence during programs and classes is just one of the 10 recommendations made by a committee formed to review the HALT Act as a condition to end a 3-week-long wildcat strike by corrections officers last year. Gold was on the committee. How many of those recommendations have they adopted so far?
There's been zero at all.
Changing the law is up to state lawmakers, but Republican State Senator George Borrello says there's not much of an appetite to reform HALT among majority Democrats. So he's calling on Governor Hochul to intervene.
A permanent change would require an act of legislature, but the governor can act unilaterally by executive order, and she could certainly declare a state of emergency in our prisons, which she should do because it is a dangerous state right now, and she could enact changes and suspend HALT.
He reasons that if Hochul runs the state and the state runs the prisons,
she is responsible for the safety of those employees and of the inmates. If any private sector employer intentionally did not address the dangerous situations that she has created, they'd be brought up on charges.